welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beast Family Podcast. It is that time for another conference preview edition as we are going to be taking a look at the American Conference. This is going to be a very fascinating conference because, as we know, quite a bit of realignment with regards to the American. This is not the American that we remember from last year, so here in segment number one, we are going to be taking a look at some of the styles of play of the teams that are going to be coming in, that are going to be outgoing. We're going to be looking at a few betting trends as well. A little bit less within the conference because you pretty much have a mashup of Conference USA and what was last year's American coming together. So we're going to be gauging that and the just various styles of play that we are going to be seeing in segment number one. Segment number two, even though it's a new look American, it's the same guest that we all know and love to break down this fine conference. Mike O'Donnell, he does tremendous work over at CBS Sports. He does a lot of their color commentary. I know that he's done some great work with ESPN as well. He is going to be joining me in segment number two. He is going to be taking a look at every one of these rosters. We're going to be taking a look at some of the coaching changes and so much more of the American. And then in the final segment, I'm going to give you guys my projector or finish for the new look American. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we all fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And now that the formalities are done, let's get down to business and let's take a look at an American that, well, it's pretty much like I was mentioning before. Half of what we had from Conference USA last year, half of what we had from the American last year. Two of the main stalwarts from last season in Tulane and Memphis are going to be back in the fold, along with a bunch that has been in past years very solid, but has fallen on some tough times in Wichita State. That is going to be one of the more interesting teams in the conference. A lot of the lesser teams like East Carolina, a team that has great pedigree, but in recent years hasn't necessarily been able to show that off. Temple, Go Owls, they are going to be back in the fold. And then it's really those top teams from Conference USA. I'm talking about the likes of UAB, I was mentioning before, along Florida Atlantic. You do bring in Rice as well, I think, has some upside. And you just take a look at the way that things play out with regards to this conference. A team that I've yet to mention, North Texas, they were dead last in the country with regards to possessions per game. And I think that the American is really one of these conferences that you do want to be looking at and having a lot of teams that are going to be able to do a solid job in March because they are going to be seeing such a wide range of styles. Because North Texas, because they do have the coaching change with Grant McCasland, they're probably not going to quite be dead last with regards to total possessions per game like they were last season, but they're still going to be a really stinking slow team. And then you got Tulane, who was number one in the country last year with regards to possessions per game. I don't know if they'll be number one again, but I mean, they're an up-tempo team. Last year you had Memphis be a top 25 team with regards to total possessions per game. UAB was certainly a team that got after it. They're a team that was in the top 40 with regards to total possessions per game. Rice, Go Owls, they're one of your quicker teams. They were 54th in the country with regards to total possessions per game. Wichita State last year was a mid-tempo team, but Paul Mills, who takes over, he was from Oral Roberts last year. They were last year 78th with regards to possessions per game, and that was considered slow for them. So you do have quite a few of those up-tempo teams, and then you've got a few coaches coming in from interesting places like Kennesaw State, Go Owls, Amir Abdul-Rahim. He's coming in to help out a South Florida team that traditionally under Brian Gregory was very slow. Adam Fisher, he comes in as an assistant from Penn State. Penn State last year was 334th in the country with regards to total possessions per game. Charlotte, they've got a little bit of an interim coaching regime, but they were third lowest with regards to total possessions per game. So you just have a very, very wide range of styles with all these teams. Now, within this conference, most of the teams are able to shoot it well from three-point range. Tulsa, we're going to get to in a minute. They were not successful really at anything whatsoever. They're going to be looking to get back to their roots. They were a little bit of an exception to this, but Fisher, who comes in from Penn State, they were number 7 in the country last year with regards to three-point shooting percentage. Some of these teams, they were a little bit of higher volume teams, like UAB, for instance. they were a team that they just racked up a whole bunch of possessions, which I did think that was a very interesting approach from them. But Florida Atlantic, 42nd in the country last year with regards to overall three-point shooting percentage. Once again, you've got Wichita State under the tutelage now of Paul Mills from Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts was 43rd in the country with regards to their three-point shooting percentage as well. Had a lot of teams that were more towards the middle of the country with this regard, like South Florida last year. They were much improved after 2 seasons ago. They were dead last in the country with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. North Texas, 86th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. Memphis was number 101, so going to be really interesting to see how this plays out because you've got a lot of teams that are very versatile, and then you've got teams like North Texas, Florida Atlantic coming into this conference that they were some of the better defensive teams in all of college basketball last season as well. But if you do take a look at the betting trends with regards to these teams in the American, you had a lot of teams that were just really good against the spread in general, and you just take a look at what Florida Atlantic was able to do. One of the most profitable teams in all of college basketball, 25-11-1 against the spread. Eastern Kentucky, Utah Valley State, and UConn were the only teams that made you more money last year with regards to cover rate than them. And then past that, you had a Charlotte team that was able to win the CBI last year. They were able to come on strong a little bit later on during the campaign. Now, you also have the least successful team against the spread in all of college basketball from last year in Tulsa. 424-2 against the spread. I utilize typically team rankings for taking a look at pass against the spread records, and that was the worst cover rate I could find for a whole season that I could unearth. I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous among teams that had at least 10 games logged, because you can find one of those straight teams that maybe they played like 2 games against D1 competition, they went 0-2, something like that. But it is really interesting to take a look at these teams because I mentioned Charlotte, North Texas. These were a pair of teams that were very solid against the spread last year, coming in from Conference USA. Both went 22-14 against the spread. UAB was 17-19-2 against the spread. UTSA, meet for the Roadrunners. They went 13-15-2 against the spread, but you're getting some of the more successful Conference USA teams. Rice was right around 15-16-1 against the spread, and with regards to holdovers from the American last season, certainly you lose the top cover team from a season ago in Cincinnati. They were 23-12 against the spread, but East Carolina, they were a very solid ATS team. They were able to rise up. First year under Michael Schwartz, they went 20-13 against the spread. Temple, they went 18-13-1 against the spread. South Florida was 18-14 against the spread. A lot of the teams that returned, Sans Tulsa, they were pretty good money-making teams for you. Houston was only about 19-18 against the spread. That was mainly because they just had such high numbers placed on them that it was hard to be able to cover those. And what I think is so interesting about taking a look at this conference as well, very much an underdog conference, as in the role of a favorite, a lot of these teams struggled. You had Wichita State go 7-7 against the spread. Temple went 8-9 against the spread. And then you had South Florida go like 7-8 against the spread. Tulane 9-14 against the spread. Tulsa did not cover a single game against the spread as a favorite at SMU. They went 3-6-2 against the spread with that regard. You take a look at Conference USA and some of the teams that are incoming. Florida Atlantic, they were just good at everything. 18-9 against the spread as a favorite. North Texas 19-11 against the spread as a favorite, and Charlotte went 13-10 against the spread as a favorite. But now they're going to be facing, in my opinion, more formidable competition. Now they're not going to be going up against as many teams like a Florida National, like a even Louisiana Tech, which Louisiana Tech, a relatively solid team. I think that they would struggle in the American, much like I think that UTSA, once again, meet for the Roadrunners, is going to be doing this season. And what I think is also very fascinating about this conference as well is it is going to be a little bit more spread out, and I do think that it's going to present some good opportunities for these home teams. Now, Rice comes in after going just 6-9 against the spread at home last season, but Florida Atlantic went 10-4-1 against the spread at home. Charlotte was a 10-5 against the spread team at home. North Texas was an 8-6 against the spread team at home. And then with regards to the American teams that are holdovers from a season ago, East Carolina 11-5 against the spread at home. Temple 9-7 against the spread at home. Did have SMU struggle a little bit. 6-9-1 against the spread at home. Tulsa 2-10-2 against the spread at home. I mean, they were just absolutely horrible. You had Memphis and Wichita State both cover 33% or fewer of their games at home. And what else I think is going to be fascinating is how these styles really lend themselves out, because the American, they had a little bit of a range of styles last season, but it wasn't as demonstrative as Conference USA, and you've got a lot of your over teams that are returning. As a matter of fact, the top 4 over teams from the American from last season, they're all back. South Florida, 21 overs and 11 unders. Same goes for SMU. Both of these teams hit 65.5% of their games to the over last year. Temple was more around 16, 15, and 1 to the over. Tulsa, they were 15 overs, 14 unders, and a push. Memphis was 19 overs, 16 unders. But every single team that returns from the American from last season, they all hit north of 50% of their games to the over. Meanwhile, the teams that come in from Conference USA, Rice was just able to put up a whole bunch of overs along with UTSA. Roadrunners, 20 overs, 10 unders. Rice, 22 overs, 10 unders. You did see Charlotte go 14 overs, 18 unders, and 4 pushes. They were a team that was very slow, but even North Texas, slowest team in all of college basketball last year, because their numbers were so low in their games, they only had 18 unders compared to 17 overs and a push. So I do think that this might be a little bit of an overwhelming conference as a result. So we've got a lot of intrigue. We've got a very new look American, but a man that does an absolutely amazing job of taking a look at this conference is Mike O'Donnell. Coming up next, he's going to join me. We're going to be taking a look at every single one of these rosters, some of the styles of play we can expect to see with some of these coaching changes, and so much more right here on Coach Gus Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Decent Family Podcast, the American Conference Preview Edition.
Are you ready to become a winning sports bettor? Schedule a call with SBIA to find out how their service can make you a long-term winning player. They've developed an innovative algorithm that maximizes units returned, and they are so confident in their system that they offer a money-back guarantee. Sign up by October 31st and get their MBA package at no cost until they reach 10 net units. They treat sports betting like a business. So if you want to learn how to make your sports betting dreams a reality, visit them at SBIA1.com and check them out on social media at SBIA Sports.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coach Gus Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. This is the American Conference Preview Edition, and it's always great to have this man aboard. Even though the conference looks a little bit different, it's the same great guest that always does a tremendous job of taking a look at all these teams. Mike O'Donnell, he does great color commentary when it comes to broadcasts over at CBS Sports and ESPN, and I know that he added a new venture the last few days as he is going to be doing a lot more work this year over at CBS Sports HQ. They do a nice job taking a look at the great game of basketball. Mike, I know, does a lot with regards to the American every single year, and you're able to follow him on Twitter, which is better known as X now, as MOD, the number 4, and then the word 3 all together. And Mike, always great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Greg. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Mike. And Mike, before we get started taking a look at these teams, how difficult is it to gauge what we're going to be getting this year in the American? Because as I was putting it in the first segment, it's pretty much taking the upper half of Conference USA, combining it with about half of what we had from the American last year. And it's just so wild to see a conference look so different from one year to the next, because it's pretty much having 2 conferences slapped into one this year.
Very well said. You know, with Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF leaving to go to the Big 12, it was kind of all hands on deck for American Conference Commissioner Mike Oresco, and who are you going to add? And they added the best teams that they could. And I mean, and honestly, when you're talking about TV eyeballs in major metropolitan areas and big cities, I think they hit as much of a home run as they possibly could, specifically when it comes to basketball. And, you know, there's going to be some familiar teams, but there are some that are certainly have been bounced around from Conference USA to other conferences. And it's going to be fascinating to watch. Still going to be great mid-major hoops, though.
Oh, it certainly is going to be. And let's lead off with the team that was able to make the Final Four last year in Florida Atlantic, as I do think that they are the team to beat with regards to this conference. They are newcomers, but with Florida Atlantic, my goodness, what they were able to do last season was absolutely remarkable. They were able to play fast. They were able to play slow. And really, other than Michael Forrest, everyone comes back. Not really anything new coming into the program, but just the same guys that we know and love from last year. And I don't know if they can make a Final Four once again, because you need a lot of things to break right in order to make a Final Four. But I think that this is once again going to be one of the more solid teams in all of college basketball this season.
I'll start with your kind of recent comment of, a lot of things need to fall together to make a Final Four run. There's absolutely no doubt about it. There is no denying, though, how good of a head coach Dusty May is. And before we kind of just get into the X's and O's and who this team is, when you're talking about, Florida Atlantic and can they make a run again? Well, you just mentioned they didn't lose essentially anybody. Now, they lost Michael Forrest, who was really 7th, 8th guy off the bench. He was one of their best three-point shooters, but everybody's back. I mean, just absolutely shocking that they brought everybody back in the era of the transfer portal, virtually impossible. This team, I've seen them practice in person already, and they look even better than they did last season. Now, I say that to say that, am I going to guarantee that, absolutely, they're going to be in a Final Four? No. But they went to a Final Four. They won 35 games, 18-2 in Conference USA. Dusty May has never had a losing season, even if they didn't make it to a Final Four, even if they didn't win Conference USA last season. To have a winning record every single year at Florida Atlantic is almost unbelievable. But look at their path, Greg, when they went to the Final Four. I'm not saying you said it was a fluke, but they beat a very good Memphis team who Greg, you and I had talked about multiple times, where a lot of people thought that Memphis, because of Kendrick Davis, had the capacity to be like an Elite Eight type team. So they beat Memphis in the opening round. Then they beat Fairleigh Dickinson after Fairleigh Dickinson's stunning and legendary upset over Purdue. Everybody assumed that Fairleigh Dickinson was going to go on this magical run. They beat Fairleigh Dickinson. Then they beat 4th seed Tennessee in the Sweet 16, one of the best defenses in the country, if not the best. And then they beat 3 seed Kansas State, who at the time was really kind of like America's team in the Elite Eight. And they were literally one shot away from playing the national championship game when they lost to San Diego State within seconds with a shot. So I think it's more than possible that you could have a team could go to back-to-back Final Fours, similar to what we saw. There's a lot of similarities to when Butler did it over a decade ago, because they brought everybody back. But the most interesting thing about this team, their depth is absurd. When I watched them in practice, it was like hockey substitutions. And it wasn't like just one specific starting five. It was just Dusty May was putting 10 guys on the floor in each at a time, and then just rotating 5 guys in, 5 guys out, 5 guys in, 5 guys out. And he told me specifically, he says, look, our biggest issue is that everybody can play. He goes, I'm not just saying that. And you don't have to take that with a grain of salt either, because they led the country in bench points per minute last season. They were phenomenal off the bench. So they have everybody back, and they're going to be even deeper. Don't be surprised at all if you see Florida Atlantic playing a lot faster. That's going to be the most important thing to pay attention to. They want to play fast. They want to move. They want to get up and down. And because of their depth, they can do that. They were really kind of top, if my memory serves me correct, it's in between 200 and 250 in terms of adjusted tempo per KenPom. And they want to be top 50 this year in tempo. They are trying to score as early and often as possible. And we're going to know quickly whether or not that system actually works, because their non-conference schedule's a monster. They play in the ESPN Events Invitational. It has Iowa State, Texas A&M, Penn State, Virginia Tech, VCU, and Boise. They play Illinois in Madison Square Garden. And they have some really, really tough mid-major matchups: Loyola Chicago, Liberty, Charleston, St. Bonaventure. So we're going to know early, but I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if they're going to win, have a program record for wins at 35 wins, but I wouldn't be surprised if Florida Atlantic ends up getting, at a minimum, 28 wins this season.
Oh, I would not be surprised either, because this Florida Atlantic team is awesome. And you talk about them playing a little bit more quickly. What did make them so good last year as well is that they were able to take down those fast teams like a UAB. But then when they go up against the slowest team in college basketball, like North Texas as well, they did a great job there, as Mike O'Donnell does great work over at CBS Sports and ESPN, calling games as a color analyst for their college basketball work, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And let's take a look at that North Texas team, who they were dead last in the country last year with regards to possessions. Grade might look a little bit different because Grant McCaslin, he's out of the fold. He gets a well-deserved promotion up to Texas Tech. I think that he's going to be doing great things over there, and you are going to need to replace Tyler Perry. But that said, they are going to be bringing back some solid players from last year, as you've got Aaron Scott, Reuben Jones, as they combine for about 14 points, a little bit over 2 steals per contest. And I like some of the guys that are coming in. Guy like a CJ Nolan, who was over at Oklahoma. John Buggs III, who they've got familiarity with UTSA. They've done a nice job of being able to bring in some nice freshmen as well. I take a look at this North Texas team, and I don't think that they're going to be dead last in the country with regards to possessions per game, but they really kept things in-house, and I think the fulcrum of last year's team is still going to be there even without Tyler Perry.
I agree with that, but they actually lost a lot. And now Tyler Perry is going to be one of those guys that at Kansas State is going to be one of the top guards in the Big 12. I mean, he was, in my opinion, one of the most efficient pick-and-roll scorers in the country, and analytically, he was top 5 in the country in terms of pick-and-roll scoring efficiency. Outside of losing Tyler Perry, they lost Kai Huntsberry, who was a just phenomenal defender. And if you know anything about North Texas, you're going to talk about their defense, you're going to talk about Tyler Perry, but the anchor of their defense was really Huntsberry, especially on the perimeter. They lose Usman, who averaged 11.6 rebounds a game as well, and a couple other role-playing pieces. So there's big chunks that were lost. Now, Ross Hodge, first-year head coach, he's been an assistant for a number of years in North Texas. Really, if you talk to anybody who knows the North Texas program, he essentially is the mastermind behind the defense, but does want to play faster. And North Texas's defense, you're in a position now when North Texas has solidified themselves for every college basketball geek that when you talk about top defenses in the country, you're going to talk about Houston, San Diego State, Tennessee, as St. Mary's, and then North Texas deserves to be in that conversation as consistently one of the most just exhausting and suffocating defenses to play against. You mentioned a couple new players. Obviously, Buggs, transfer from UTSA, he is going to have to come in and score right away. It absolutely is going to have to happen. He averaged almost 11 points a game at UTSA. There's going to be some other players, Robert Allen, who's going to have to come in, most likely will step into a starting role, average about 4 points a game at Ole Miss. And CJ Nolan, you got to remember, came in with a whole lot of pedigree coming into Oklahoma. Very, very good player. Never really kind of found his footing. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Nolan started the season coming off the bench and then worked his way into the starting lineup. But you still got some players that can absolutely get after it defensively, returning players. Specifically, Aaron Scott, who's about 6'6", 6'7". He's a junior, averaged almost 30 minutes per game for North Texas. And McCaslin told me last year when I called one of their games, he said Aaron Scott has a chance to be one of the best defenders in the history of North Texas basketball. Aaron Scott's going to end up having to take the lead defensively, but also he's going to have to score more. It's just going to have to come down to scoring. He only averaged 7 points a game. It's going to be weird. You kind of said it, Greg. The defense is going to be good. It's going to be fine. When I say good, it'll probably be top 3, top 4 in the American because that's what they do. But we don't quite know what the offense is going to look like. I mean, I kind of expect North Texas to fall. I don't think they're going to be in the top 5, but they certainly won't be in the bottom 5. I expect North Texas to kind of be in that 7, 8, 9 range by the end of the season in terms of conference finishing rankings.
I think that a lot of people were taken aback a little bit by this team, and I like what they've got in the fold this year, and that would be Rice. Rice is one of those teams that we always know that they're going to be looking to push the tempo. The question with them is, are they going to be able to play a lick of defense? And what I love about Rice is that they've got one of the most and best passing big men in all of college basketball, Max Fiedler. Guy that was able to give up right around 5 assists per contest at 6'11". That's a nice aspect for the team. They lose Quincy Oliveri, but bringing back Travis Evie, bringing back Karaman Sheffield to that backcourt, felt like they got a little bit better on defense as well. They don't bring in a ton via the transfer portal, but I always say this name wrong. Sam Alajiki, who comes in from Cal, he should be a nice contributor for this team. All in all, I take a look at this Rice roster, and I like what I see. Not a team that's going to be competing for the top 3, in my opinion, but a solid team I could see getting back to 20 wins.
Yeah, do not be surprised if Rice gets to 20 wins. I mean, I think 18 is their floor. 18 wins is their floor this year. Losing Quincy Oliveri is a huge blow. He transferred to Xavier. He was one of the most underappreciated scorers in the country, regardless of conference. Averaged almost 19 points a game. But I'm happy to turn this entire podcast into a Max Fiedler podcast if you want, Greg. I'm a huge fan of Fiedler's game. And if you haven't really kind of been familiar with how he's played, Fiedler's 6'11" and is one of the best passers in college basketball, period. On top of being a great passer, he led Conference USA in assists at 6'11". He was 16th in the nation in overall offensive efficiency per KenPom in the country. and he was number one in the nation in effective field goal percentage. Very gifted and effective scorer. Does not make a lot of mistakes. Fiedler is the real deal. They run a Princeton-style offense. And outside of Olivari, Greg, they have 4 starters returning from a team that won 19 games last season. And one of the reasons for success, which you kind of mentioned, is their offense is very fluid. It's very smooth. They shoot a lot of threes. Coach Para likes to call themselves, when he's on the recruiting trail, Rice is called Green Light U, because any shot's a good shot. That's the way he looks at it. They average 25 three-point attempts in the country, and they make about 9 threes a game. So this team is going to shoot the ball well. They still have Travis Evie, who's a very good three-point shooter, average almost 16 points a game. And they got Noah Shelby back and Makai Mason back. They're going to be good. It'll be interesting to see how Noah Shelby fits into the mold. 6'3" combo guard, transfer from Vanderbilt. Didn't get a lot of time at Vandy, just under 10 minutes a game. I think he'll be able to slide right into that starting lineup. But Rice is, because of some of the guys they got as freshmen and some of the transfers they got, including Noah Shelby, they may take a slight step back offensively without Olivari. But because Fiedler is so good and so hard to prepare for, their offense is still going to be very good. But I do think they're going to be better defensively. So I don't actually expect Rice to score more, but I do expect them to defend more. I'm happy to go on a limb and say I think Rice's floor in the American is 9. I think their ceiling could be the 5th, could be a 5 seed. I don't think they'll finish at 5. But I think it's where their ceiling is. I think they'll be between 5 and 9 this year.
I do think that Rice is going to be staring at perhaps being in the middle part of the conference, and I do think that there's upside because, as you were talking about Fiedler, that guy just brings something to the table that few in college basketball do. As a man that brings a lot to the table is Mike O'Donnell. Does a great job. Take a look at college basketball. He's joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops to preview the American, and this team, I think, has a high ceiling as well. How about East Carolina and the fact that they bring in Bobby Pettiford from Kansas, and on top of that, they bring in Cam Hayes, who was able to be a relatively solid scorer over there at LSU. This team was just bitten by the injury bug last year. R.J. Felton was one of the few guys that could consistently stay out there on the floor. I like the fact that they bring back Brandon Johnson, and if they could just have these guys stay out there on the floor, because we remember that Javon Small injury, that just absolutely destroyed them last season. I think that there's a lot of upside for the East Carolina team, that they showed some great flashes in year number 1 of a new coaching regime, and I think they could take some strides forward here in year number 2.
Totally agree. Mike Schwartz is our head coach, second season, and he really inherited nothing. Absolutely. The cupboard was bare when he got into East Carolina in terms of just players leaving and graduating, and he just started from complete scratch. And if it wasn't for Javon Small getting injured about a little over halfway through the season, Javon Small was going to be freshman of the year in the American Conference. He averaged almost 16 points a game. He was spectacular, but he left and he transferred. And so you kind of retool it, and they add in Bobby Pettiford, like you said, transferred from Kansas. He'll come in and start right away. Played 12 minutes a game at Kansas, but never really kind of found his footing, especially last season. He isn't the scorer that Javon Small is, but he is absolutely a capable double-digit scorer. You add him into the mix of Jaden Walker, fantastic athlete, R.J. Felton Jr., very underrated scorer, averaged almost 14 a game, 4 rebounds a game. Brandon Johnson, another double-digit scorer. And then Ezra Ausar, just a sophomore, who was a very, very good-looking freshman last season, averaged almost 10 points a game. It's interesting to look at it. You get a player like we just mentioned, Pettiford, who will absolutely be in the starting lineup. But Cam Hayes, transfer from LSU, is a player that ECU got, who averaged 8 points a game at LSU. This is a really interesting team. You got to remember about Mike Schwartz when you're watching them. I'm not a betting guy, but anytime anybody plays ECU, don't be afraid to take the under on the score, because it's not because they lack scoring, because they hang their hat on defense. Mike Schwartz was the architect of Rick Barnes' defense at Tennessee. He is a Rick Barnes disciple, and he ran that entire defense. And don't forget, on his staff now is Mark Adams, who is the former Texas Tech head coach, who had some off the court, had some issues and was released by Texas Tech. But we all know how great, top 5 in the country, Texas Tech was at defense under Mark Adams. This team is going to defend their tails off. There's a chance, and their schedule isn't too aggressive in the non-conference, but they won 16 games last year. This team could win 20 games. I think their ceiling is 7. But I could see you could twist my arm and say potentially ceiling for 6. But I think between the 6, 7, 8, 9 range, I think ECU lands right in the middle there, which would be a huge momentum swing in terms of where ECU basketball is if they finish there. And I think it's very doable.
Yep, I think so as well. I think that we're going to see some great strides forward from East Carolina. The only question is, how big are those strides going to be? And I think that this team is going to be a fascination as well, because Charlotte is a team that comes in as they let go of their head coach in Ron Sanchez during the offseason. Aaron Fernie, hopefully I said that correctly, he takes over as the interim coach. He had to take that over in June, but I mean, the good news with him is that he was able to keep, for the most part, this roster intact. You're going to have a lot of guys like Lucial Patterson back in the fold, Robert Braswell, who had 6'8", was able to shoot it well from three-point range. He's back. Jackson Thirdgill as well. I like these guys. And overall, I do take a look at this Charlotte team, and I'm quite impressed that you've got an interim coaching staff that was able to keep so much that is just back from last season. They didn't necessarily bring in a ton of pieces via the transfer portal, but we know with Charlotte, they've always had a very distinct style of playing very slowly, and they've got a lot of very good three-point shooters on this roster.
Tough to add in new pieces because Ron Sanchez left for Virginia to be an assistant coach under Tony Bennett, which is where he came from when he took the job at Charlotte. But Sanchez left really late in the game, almost middle of the summer, if my memory serves me correct. They didn't lose a ton of players. The players that transferred left before Ron Sanchez left. But the issue is those 3 players were very, very good. Bryce Williams averaged 14 a game, and Ali Khalifa would have given Max Fiedler a run for his money in terms of best passers in the American Conference, which Khalifa is a 6'10", 6'11" post player as well. Fantastic vision. And he averaged about 12 points and 6 rebounds a game, so he transferred to BYU and probably will start for BYU. So there's some certain lacking of star power at Charlotte. They're going to be very sound. This is going to be a very fundamentally sound team. They're not going to make a lot of mistakes. They just lack heavy scoring power, really scoring power of any capacity. You mentioned Jackson Threadgill comes back. He was a very solid three-point shooter, over 35% from three, averaged 6.5 a game. I mean, they need him to be averaging 11, 12 points a game. I don't know if he has the capabilities to do that, but they're going to have to. Igor Milicic is going to have to score. They've got so many players where you're like, they don't know what they have yet. There is one player in particular that you do need to pay attention to, especially with Ali Khalifa leaving. Deshaun Jackson, 6'10" transfer from Washington State. Deshaun Jackson came into college very, very highly talented, highly recruited. He averaged about 6 points, 4 rebounds a game at Washington State. He has an enormous amount of athletic and talent ability. He's never quite found his footing at the college basketball level in the way that I think a lot of people thought. They're going to run the offense through him 100%. And I think Charlotte, as Deshaun Jackson goes, Charlotte goes as well. But it's going to take some time to build this out. Charlotte is kind of, there's 14 teams in the American Conference, and I think they're going to finish in that 12, 13 range. Coming off winning the CBI, great for marketing, great for recruiting. They won 22 games, but they just lost so many pieces. We just have no idea who this team's going to be.
Oh, and no question about it. When you do have a coaching change in the middle of the summer, it's just an uphill battle, no matter how good of a coach you are. So I do think that that's going to be a little bit tough. And for South Florida, it's a little bit of a changing of the guard for them as well, as Brian Gregory, he's out of the fold, and Amir Abdul-Rahim, who was able to leave Kennesaw State to the NCAA tournament, and took over a Kennesaw State team that I still remember a few years ago, they won one stinking game, and he took them to the NCAA tournament 3 years later. That's really an achievement, and he brings with him some of his friends. Chris Youngblood, who is a big part of that team, he comes in. Brandon Stroud comes with him. Kassan Jennings as well. And they keep some of the guys that we know and love from last season, like Celta Miguel, a double-figure scorer for this team. I do think that for South Florida, it is going to take a little bit of time for some of these pieces to work together. But just with having guys like Youngblood, Brandon Stroud and company, having familiarity with Amir Abdul-Rahim coming with them, I think that that's going to make the transition a whole heck of a lot easier than you're typically going to find with a team with a first-year head coach.
Yeah, I agree. I think South Florida will overperform expectations, not in a huge way, but it's going to be the Amir Abdur-Rahim effect. He is one of the best young coaches in the country, period. That campus and arena are kind of starving for really good basketball. Brian Gregory who I have the utmost respect for, just could never really get it going there. And they lose a lot of pieces, right? You mentioned the guys coming back, but they lose Tyler Harris, who was 17 points per game, Russell Chiwa, anchor of the defense, fantastic defender, and post presence, Keyshawn Bryant, Jameer Chaplin, Ryan Conwell, the very highly touted freshman. They're all gone. So they bring in, obviously, those three players from Kennesaw State, in particular, Chris Youngblood and Brandon Stroud. Those dudes can hoop. But Chris Youngblood in particular, 6'4", senior combo guard, average almost 15 a game. He can really play. Shoots over 41% from three. Youngblood's going to compete for all conference honors. I don't know if he'll get it, but he has enough talent to do that. One player in particular outside of the Kennesaw State transfer trio that you need to pay attention to is Jose Placer out of North Florida. Guard, 6'1", redshirt senior, average about 14 points a game, almost 3 assists a game, very capable three-point shooter, close to 37%. He's going to come in and he's going to surprise a lot of people. This team, the backcourt, I think, is going to be very good. I like Selton Miguel's game a lot, who averaged 3 assists a game. He really kind of came into his own. There's some talent here. There really is. They're not huge. They're not really big, but they have very gifted wings and a good backcourt. I think South Florida, they're not going to finish last, I can tell you that. I wouldn't be surprised if South Florida finishes 11. I think their ceiling is 9, but I think their floor is 11. They won't finish in the bottom 2 or 3 this season.
I'm in agreement with you. As a matter of fact, I was taking a look at them being somewhere between 10 and 11 myself, so we are in firm agreement on that one. And when it comes to this bunch, they do have a new head coach as well, but I think that there's a lot of upside here, and I'm talking about Wichita State. They actually made the NCAA tournament with Isaac Brown taking over a really tough situation a few years ago, and then after they made that tournament, you could tell that things fizzled out the last few years. Now, Oral Roberts coach Paul Mills takes over, and as we know with Paul Mills, he's probably going to be cranking up the tempo a little bit. With Oral Roberts, we saw them the last few years be one of the most fun teams in all of college basketball, and they've got Kobe Rogers finally as well. He was one of like 5 guys last year that didn't get a waiver to be able to play. That was a rough situation for him, but they bring in guys like Ronald D. Gray III, who comes in from Missouri after he was on their bench. Harnell Beverly had a really nice start to his Miami career, just couldn't find minutes last year. Dalen Ridgenall comes in from Missouri State. I like the pieces that he brought in, and with Wichita State, I think that this could be one of those classic teams that maybe they start off a little bit slowly because they don't have a ton of chemistry, but as these guys get reps together, as they're able to play some games together, they're able to fire on all cylinders late.
I agree. There's talent here that they're not going to quite play like those Oral Roberts teams. And something that you have to understand about Paul Mills is I think he's one of the better offensive minds in college basketball, one of the great young coaches in college basketball, which really, you kind of go up and down the American Conference. A side note here, Greg, is the head coaching talent from an age perspective is the Americans got some of the best youth head coaching talent in the country. They lost a lot of a team that really kind of struggled. At Wichita won 17 games for them, finished 6th in the American, right? They fought, clawed their way to 9 wins in the conference, but that's not Wichita State standards. I thought it was a great hire, getting Paul Mills. They lose a lot. Right, Craig Porter Jr., 13 points per game, almost 5 assists a game, one of the great mid-major guards in college basketball. Jaquan Walton, he's gone. Jaron Pierre's gone. James Rojas is gone. Those are 4 double-digit scores. Porter averaged 13, Walton 14, Jaron Pierre 10, Rojas 10. That's a lot to kind of figure out. It's going to be some building blocks. It's going to take a little time, but I think as much as we talk about Paul Mills at his office, I think this Wichita State team is going to hang their hat on defense. You mentioned a few of the guys. Colby Rogers, transfer from Tennessee. Harlan Beverly, transfer from Miami. Very good defenders. Jacob Germany, transfer from UT Tennessee. He'll probably compete for starting minutes. Germany averaged 12 points, 8 rebounds a game at UTSA. Another player in the backcourt that you're definitely going to have to pay attention to, I do think is going to end up starting, is Bijan Cortez, who is one of the best pick-and-roll defenders in all of the Big 12 last season. In guarding pick-and-roll action, he is an absolute maniac in the best possible way to describe. And I think he'll insert himself into a starting lineup. And there's one player, I think in particular, that's going to be really interesting, I think will mesh really well with the offensive mind of Paul Mills, and that's Kenny Poto, who averaged about 8 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, almost 2 assists a game last season for Wichita, 6'11", very underrated basketball IQ, and vision. And I think Poto will adapt very well to Paul Mills's open space, read and react type offense. And it'll take some time, but I like the talent that Paul Mills brought in. I think there's enough talent for Wichita State to finish in that 6, 7, 8 range. I really do. I think their floor is 8. I think their ceiling is 6. Upper middle pack for the Shockers this year, which I think most Wichita State fans would be happy with that.
And I could see a scenario where maybe they get off to like a rough 1-3, 1-4 start within the American, but then they get on a big giant run and they become that classic, you don't want to play this team in the conference tournament sort of squad. As joining me on the show, we do have Mike O'Donnell, who does tremendous work over at ESPN and CBS Sports, taking a look at the great game of college basketball. And this is a new-look team as well in UAB. They lose 4 of their top 5 scorers from last year, with Eric Gaines the main holdover. But what I find interesting is that UAB actually went the junior college route. Alejandro Vasquez along the XL, Lenderborg, hopefully I said that correctly. These 2 guys, they were ranked by JUCOrecruiting.com as top 10 junior college transfers. And Vasquez actually has some experience at the D1 level, began his career at St. Bonaventure. They bring in Daniel Ortiz, one of the most underrated sharpshooters in all of college basketball from North Alabama. And if there's a coach that's going to be able to make it work, it's Andy Kennedy. This guy has been tremendous ever since he got to UAB. And quite frankly, when he was at Ole Miss, he overachieved darn near every single year there. And I could see another scenario where even though UAB loses a lot of pieces, because they do have one fulcrum guy in Eric Gaines, I do think that Andy Kennedy can find a way to be able to make these pieces work. And he's got such a pedigree to where he just never falls short of expectations, like ever.
No question. He's one of the most underrated coaches in the country. Their offensive system is one of the most underappreciated systems in college basketball. They run some beautiful stuff, and not to geek out too much about it, but they've got some great action. Andy Kennedy can flat out coach, period. They got some pieces coming back before we talk about the new guys. In particular, a guy like Javion Davis, who ended up being the anchor of that defense for UAB towards the second half of the season. You mentioned Eric Gaines, and I think Eric Gaines is electrifying. Could be a SportsCenter top 10 highlight every time he touches the floor. A freak athlete, fantastic vision with the basketball. Is one of those guys that he's going to push for being one of the best passers in the American Conference. Averaged 4 assists a game last season, and he averaged about 11 points per game. Here's the thing about Eric Gaines, and I think Andy Kennedy would tell anybody about this. Last season, he was feast or famine. You were either getting something amazing or you got barely anything. That cannot happen. With so many new pieces, with Jelly Walker gone, but so many other role players gone, he has to be Mr. Consistent. It's the only way for UAB to have legitimate, sustainable success this season. And if he is, he turns UAB into an absolute threat to finish in the top 4 in the American Conference. You mentioned some guys. Daniel Ortiz from North Alabama, get to know that name. Flat out shooter at 6 foot, averaged almost 15 a game at North Alabama, shot over 40% from 3. And I have to see him maybe distribute a little bit more. He only averaged 1 assist a game. But they also got James White, transferred from Ole Miss. You mentioned the JUCO players as well. Don't be surprised if Will Shaver, transferred from North Carolina, ends up getting a lot of playing time towards the end of the season as he tries to learn the Andy Kennedy system. But Andy Kennedy has totally embraced the transfer portal. He's completely embraced the new era of college basketball, of putting a team together quickly, molding it fast, and then building it throughout the season and having it grow. This is still a very talented team. They've got skill in the backcourt. The Eric Gaines, Daniel Ortiz backcourt might be a top 5 backcourt in the American Conference, enough to push to get you over 20 wins in a season for sure. James White is still a little bit of what's he going to be like, the transfer from Ole Miss, as I recently mentioned. There's plenty of talent here. I look at this UAB team, and I'm not quite sure, where I think they're going to end up officially getting picked preseason. I think their floor is 5. I think their ceiling is 3. Their floor is finishing 5th, and their ceiling is finishing 3rd. I like this UAB team a lot because I'm a huge Andy Kennedy fan in terms of how he coaches and prepares his team. And each team that he's coached at UAB in the last couple of years has played different every single year because he has coached at the talent that he has, which is the sign of a really good coach. A couple of years ago, they were all defense, full court press, and they won games off their defense. Last 2 years, they won games because of their offense, because of Jelly Walker, because of what they did. They're trying to score 90 a game. They're not going to be that. but they won't play exactly the same. They won't, which is just a testament to how good Andy Kennedy is. So I think that 3 to 5 range in terms of conference standings at the end of the season is very real for UAB.
I still remember a few years ago, UAB was a little bit of a slower team during the 2020-21 season, to your point, and last year they were playing at a breakneck pace. So certainly Andy Kennedy, he's able to adjust with the guys on his roster, and Memphis might need to adjust a little bit as well with regards to the guys on their roster, because we've got some question marks with regards to this team. The DeAndre Williams, is he going to get a waiver or not question continues to linger. Seems like they should have Malcolm Dandridge back at the fold, but this is a very new-look team from last year. Kendrick Davis was the heart and soul of that team last year. He's out of the fold, but they bring in David Jones, who's capable of going off for a triple-double from time to time from St. John's. Caleb Mills. A lot of people forget, a few years ago, he was a preseason player of the year in the American while he was over at Houston. Jaquan Walton has a lot of talent. Jordan Brown was the main guy for a Louisiana team that made the NCAA tournament. With Memphis, I feel like this is the most mysterious team out there in the America because, for one, we just don't know what the roster is going to look like at this point because there are some waivers that do need to go through. And for two, with Penny Hardaway, he has been a little bit all over the place as a coach, but I will say, I feel like he's gotten better with every year that he has been a coach, and he's been able to learn more and more about the college basketball game itself.
Yeah, I agree. He's adjusted every single year, and to his credit, deservedly so. I think this Memphis team, I'm not one to super hot take, but I think this Memphis team is if, and this is the big if with the all caps plus an asterisk. If DeAndre Williams gets eligible, this Memphis team is going to be better than last season's Memphis team. If DeAndre Williams gets eligible, you pair him with Javon Quinterly, transfer from Alabama, lightning fast, super high IQ, with Caleb Mills, very, very talented guard. Obviously, like you mentioned, started his career at Houston before ended up transferring to Florida State, who was a starter for Florida State, played good but not great, averaged 13 a game in the ACC. Just didn't shoot the three well. It was his worst three-point shooting performance in college. He shot under 30% from three. If DeAndre Williams gets eligible, if Caleb Mills shoots anywhere close to 34, 35% from three, and if Javon Quinterly gets to open up his game a little bit more, that is the most talented trio in the American Conference, and that is absolutely a team that can win games in March. Absolutely. They also have guys like Jaquan Walton, who transferred from Wichita State, averaged 14 a game from Wichita State. You mentioned David Jones. David Jones is an absolute hooper. Transferred from St. John's. You talk about filling up the stat sheet. A very, very underrated piece that Penny Hardaway brought in is Jordan Brown. Jordan Brown, transfer from Louisiana, highly touted recruit coming out of high schools, had multiple stops before he got to Louisiana, Pac-12 sixth man of the year. He averaged 19 a game at Louisiana and 8 rebounds a game. That dude can play, flat out play. If you got Jordan Brown, Brown's a hybrid forward at 6'11". You pair him next to DeAndre Williams, and you got a backcourt of Javon Quinterly and Caleb Mills. My goodness, if there's a way for Penny to get that fit, that's a better team than last season's Memphis team. So you're right. There's a lot of question marks, but the all caps if plus an asterisk, you put DeAndre Williams in that starting lineup, that's some serious star power, Greg.
Oh, it certainly is some serious star power, and I mean that's the team where there's the most question marks just because those waivers do need to be coming through, especially for DeAndre Williams. But I think that in terms of raw talent and talent itself, they have just so much upside. And we were talking about Florida Atlantic a little bit ago. If that timeout gets called for Memphis, maybe we're talking about them being that team that would have made the Final Four, because I think that they had that much talent as well. I mean, I thought Florida Atlantic was very worthy of making that Final Four run, but Memphis was, in my opinion, just as good as Florida Atlantic as well, and shows you how thin the margins are when it comes to the NCAA tournament.
I don't think it's any coincidence that the last regular season game in the American Conference is Florida Atlantic versus Memphis.
Yes, I think that is going to be absolutely tremendous. That is going to be a lot of fun theater to take a look at, to say the least, as Mike O'Donnell does a great job breaking down the game of college basketball. Joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And let's dive in on this team because, well, if you bet against Tulsa last year, it went very well for you. I don't think that they are going to be quite the same team that you want to be going up against quite as much this year, because Eric Conkle is a very solid head coach. He just had some pieces that didn't necessarily work out for him. And what I like what Eric Conkle did in the offseason, he's bringing with him some of his friends from Louisiana Tech. Keston Willis, Kobe Williams. they are now joining him after he coached them up a few seasons ago over at Louisiana Tech. You can tell that there just were a lot of pieces that, in general, he didn't necessarily have a feel for at Tulsa. Those are guys that are now out of the fold. He's looking to build completely brand new. This is still a rebuilding job at Tulsa, but now I think you're number 2 for Eric Conkle. At the very minimum, this team can find a little bit more of an identity and just know who they are a little bit more.
Yeah, you're right. This season is a season of finding identity. You are 100% right about Eric Conkle. To win at Louisiana Tech like he did is phenomenal. It's very difficult to recruit to Louisiana Tech in Ruston, Louisiana. But they were a top 3 defensive team in Conference USA 6 out of his last 7 years as head coach at Louisiana Tech. And that's his calling card, turning defense to offense. That's the thing that he does. They did not do that last year. They were one of the worst Division I teams in the country last year. Not for a lack of trying. He just inherited an empty cupboard. They couldn't get the players in, and he essentially retooled his entire roster. Most players left and brought in some players from Louisiana Tech that are flat-out hoopers. Kobe Williams in particular will compete as maybe one of the top 5 scoring guards in the American Conference. Averaged almost 20 points a game at Louisiana Tech. Just a fantastic talent. Keaston Willis, transferred from Louisiana Tech, another senior, averaged 12 points a game. Very good defender. And they're bringing in a whole lot of new faces. Some of those, PJ Haggerty played at TCU. The staff is really excited about Isaiah Barnes, transferred from Michigan. They felt that Barnes really kind of never got enough credit at Michigan in terms of playing time. Chauncey Gibson, transferred from Clemson. There's a lot to like in Tulsa. I'm going to say this. We have no idea what they're going to look like. On paper, they are way more talented this season than they were last season. They're not going to finish last. I think their floor is 13, but I think their ceiling could be 10 or 11. And that, to me, would be the Eric Conkle effect. If Kobe Williams stays healthy, he is a good enough player, to score 18, 19 points a game in the American Conference. And they're going to play a lot faster. I can almost guarantee you that Tulsa will play a lot faster. So that's kind of where I see Tulsa falling.
I do think that Tulsa is going to be much better this season. I think that there's a lot of upside with them. And when it comes to this bunch, I do think that it's going to be quite a bit of a rebuilding job for them. And I am talking about UT San Antonio. They're the one team that comes in from Conference USA last year that they had their struggles. I think that there's no denying the fact that they got in a much more for their football rather than their basketball. But with UTSA, I think that trying to rebuild from having John Buggs out of the fold, that is going to be a little bit rough for this team. They are a bunch that was able to find a little bit of scoring towards back half of the season. But in general, I think that there are going to be a lot of moving parts for this UTSA team. With UTSA, they are a team that you don't want to be picking anyone last, but I do think that they're probably going to be my selection there, and it's going to be all based on can Justin Thomas, Quincy McGriff, guys like this take some strides forward as they come in from the transfer portal.
Yeah, I agree with you. Steve Henson is a good coach in his 8th season. UTSA, they finished 11th in Conference USA last season, and they lose a lot of a team that kind of struggled. They lose 4 double-digit scores. Medor, Germany, Buggs, Richards, those 4 guys are gone, and they were all double-digit scores. So they had to bring in a lot of new faces, and it's going to take some time. I do like the transfer they got from Pacific. Jordan Ivy Curry averaged double digits up in scoring at Pacific. They do have a 7-footer. Dre Fuller will also compete for a starting lineup. He was probably UCF's best player or role player off the bench, transfer from UCF, and he's going to come in and compete for starting minutes. This is a team that you don't know what you have yet. The one thing that UTSA is going to have to do is they're going to have to get more physical. Steve Henson's best teams are when they were extremely physical, and the American is a physical offense. You think about UAB and Florida Atlantic and Memphis and Wichita State. Everything's about physicality and toughness. The UTSA did not play like that last season. So if they're going to win games, it's going to be defensively. They got a long way to go. It's going to take some time. I mean, it's a total roster reconstruction. And I think the biggest thing to pay attention to is rebounding. This is not a big team. Even though they have a 7-footer and Carlton Lingard Jr., they're not a big team. It's going to be rebound by committee for sure. That's how they're going to have to continue to survive in the league. But this roster, to me, is you do have to pick someone last. Like you said, I hate doing it. It's probably the Roadrunners.
And I think that rebound by committee is something that this team is going to need to do a little bit of as well, as Temple is looking to turn over a new leaf. Aaron McKee is out of the fold. Penn State assistant Adam Fisher is taking over. And they do bring back some pieces I like. Heisler Miller, Jaleel White. These are two guys with some very good versatility. Stat sheet suffers. They bring in Steve Settle III, part of that Howard team that was able to make the NCAA tournament at 6'10". He's not necessarily a guy that's going to go out there and get you 10-plus rebounds. He's actually someone that is going to stretch a floor, pop a few threes. They're bringing in someone like a Jordan Riley that comes in from Georgetown, and I think it's very clear what Temple is looking to do. They're not looking to just put a bunch of guys in via the transfer portal, try to make a run at it in year number one and see what happens from there. This feels like it's a little bit of a longer rebuilding job that they're going to take their lumps in season number one, but they want to be able to build an identity and they want to have something sustainable for years to come.
No question about it. When you lose Caleb Battle, who averaged 18 a game, and Damian Dunn, who transferred to Houston, 15 points a game, that's a tough load. You also lose Nick Jourdain, who transferred from Memphis. Isaiah Miller is one of the more steady point guards in the American Conference. He averaged 8 points a game, but almost 4 assists as well. He shot 31% from three. They're going to ask him to score more. He needs to be above 35% from three. But that's a guy who can average 35, 36 minutes a game and not blink an eye. You mentioned Jordan Riley. They're going to ask him to score a lot. Jaleel White, he's got to step his game up. Steve Settle III, transfer from Howard. Pretty talented front court player at 6'10", average 11-5 at Howard. A player you need to really pay attention to, I think, is really interesting, is Matteo Piccarelli. Matteo Piccarelli, transferred from UMBC. He shot almost 40% from three. He's going to end up having the green light. 6'2" guard, only averaged 22 minutes a game at UMBC. But when you look at the head coach and who is Adam Fisher, and you talk about young head coaching talent, Greg, you watched probably plenty of Penn State games. They had one of the most beautiful offenses in the country. They ran great stuff. It was impossible to try to guard them. Almost impossible to try to guard them. Micah Shrewsbury was an X's and O's genius on the offensive end. But his right-hand guy, in terms of masterminding the offense, was Adam Fisher, who now takes over and is going to be leading the Liacouras Center and the Temple Owls in a total rebuild. This is 100%, you're correct. This is a rebuild. They have a solid point guard in Isaiah Miller. If they can find three-point shooting, if they can find some type of consistency from the three-point line, this team will surprise some people because Adam Fisher is going to run great stuff. I think Temple is going to finish in that 9, 10, 11 range. I think their floor is 11. I think their ceiling is 9. But this is going to be a much different looking Temple team. I think they're going to want to play faster, but there's just not enough obvious talents to talk about in this standpoint of will they be able to overachieve. I think they're smack dab in that 9, 10, 11 range right now.
And they do have a roster that is built much like Penn State was last season, not necessarily a ton of size, but a lot of guys are able to stroke it from three-point range as well, which I do find to be something that should be of the advantage of Fisher because he knows how to maneuver that sort of a roster. And when it comes to SMU, last season things were a little bit shaky for them to say the least, but I do think that season number 2 for this coaching regime is going to be going a little bit better. I like what Rob Lanier is trying to build, and he brings back Zarick Phelps, who had himself a nice year last year, and I think one of the more under-the-radar transfers in this conference and perhaps in all of college basketball. Getting Chuck Harris, a double-figure score from Butler, I think that is exactly what this team needed. A lot of people forget that Samuel Williamson, who feels like he's been in college basketball for like 37 years, he's a former top 50 guy that has always had an ability to be able to hit the glass. He and Jaheim Hudson, I think, are going to be able to do a solid job on that front. And for SMU, I think that they're going to be able to take some strides forward. Not enough to like be cracking the top 5 or anything like that, but there's some upside with this SMU roster, in my opinion.
I'll give you some big keys for SMU. And you mentioned Chuck Harris, a transfer from Butler, and he is a double-digit scorer. I think a huge key for SMU, if Chuck Harris can be more steady with the basketball, a little too many turnovers, especially in big moments at Butler. He's got a ton of talent. I'm a big fan of his game. But if he can tighten up the screws a little bit in the turnover category, Chuck Harris is going to end up being one of the better point guards in the American Conference if he can take care of the ball. You'd like to see him over 35% from three. He shot right at 34% from three. But Chuck Harris, I think, complements Zarick Phelps very well. Zarick Phelps played himself into one of the better freshman to sophomore campaigns we saw in all of college basketball. Averaged over 17 a game. He is an absolute stud. score. There's plenty of room for improvement. I'm absolutely expecting Phelps to average over 20 points per game because I do expect him to shoot better from 30% from three. He was not a great three-point shooter. If he's 34, 35% from three, he has all the tools to lead the American Conference in scoring. That's key number one is Chuck Harris's turnovers. If he fixes that, he pairs perfectly with Zerk Phelps. Zerk Phelps improves his three-point shooting. That's key number two because of Harris's ability as being a steady point guard. And you are dead on the money with your comment about Samuel Williamson. Fifth-year senior. He's been in the college basketball forever, it feels like. He averaged about 9 points per game. I like his game a lot. He doesn't shoot a lot of threes. He only shot 17% from three. But Samuel Williamson has the talent to be one of the best two-way players in the American Conference. Those three guys, that's the whole thing. Chuck Harris's turnover, Zerk Phelps' three-point shooting, Chuck Harris's turnovers, Zerk Phelps' increased three-point shooting, and Samuel Williamson's overall offensive efficiency. If those three things hit, this SMU team can surprise a lot of people. I think their floor is a 9 seed. I think their ceiling is a 6 seed. I don't know if they can crack the top 5, but they'll be knocking at the door. If those three keys end up coming to fruition, don't be surprised if SMU surprises a few folks.
I do think that there's a lot of upside for SMU, to your point, if they're just able to increase Phelps and a few others with regards to their just three-point efficiency. Not necessarily take more threes, but just be a little bit more efficient with them, as that was a little bit of a weak point for them. And we've got one team left to take a look at with regards to the American, and that would be one of the most up-tempo teams that we saw in all of college basketball last year, in Tulane. I always like to call them the Jalens. Jalen Cook, Jalen Forbes were a big part of that. Cook is out of the fold. He is heading back to LSU, but Jalen Forbes is back, along with Zion James and Kevin Cross, who are two of the more versatile and two of the better stat sheet stuffers that you're going to find really in all of college basketball. I like their game with how fast they play. I do think that they might need to add a little bit more with regards to depth. They're going to need someone like a Greg Glenn III to be able to fill some minutes. Colin Holloway was a relatively solid shooter for the team. Would like to see a little bit more there, but I think that they're going to be able to make some valuable contributions along with VMI transfer Asher Woods to be able to make that possible.
Right now, if you ask me, put a lot of money on the table, I would say the American's going to get 2 teams guaranteed in the NCAA tournament. That would be Memphis and Florida Atlantic. Guarantees. As much as I can say guarantee legally, right? The third team, to me, the third most talented, third most ready, and the next team that is going to push the American Conference into a 3-bid league is Tulane. I don't think it's UAB. I don't think it's Wichita State. I believe it's Tulane. I'm a huge Ron Hunter fan. I think he's a great ambassador for college basketball and an even better coach. I understand you lose Jalen Cook, and that's a huge piece. He averaged 20 points a game. He's probably pound for pound outside of Kendrick Davis, the best scorer in the American Conference. A lot comes back with Jalen Forbes averaging 18 a game, shot almost 40% from three. Zion James, 6'6", point guard, total threat for a triple-double every single time he steps on the floor. Kevin Cross, he's a point forward. He's a really, really good passer, averaged 4 assists a game and almost 15 a game and 6 rebounds. Another guy who's a threat for a triple-double every time he steps onto the court. Three-point shooting is going to change the game for Tulane. If Kevin Cross and Zion James are anywhere near 35% from three, that opens everything up for Jalen Forbes because this is a Tulane team that could average 85 points a game if they're hitting threes. They bring in some transfers to pay attention to. Colby King, in particular, transfer from St. John's, never really found his footing. And then you also have guys like Asher Woods, who averaged who's just a sophomore, averaged 14 a game at VMI in a fast-paced, up-tempo offense. There's some talent here. I think Ron Hunter knows exactly what he has. This is one of the more veteran teams. It's probably the second most veteran team outside of FAU. I like this Tulane team. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is the season that it clicks for Ron Hunter because of the scoring, yet the unselfishness of this team's passing ability. This is the second best passing team behind Florida Atlantic in the American Conference. And if there is going to be a third team in the American Conference that makes the NCAA tournaments, it's going to be Tulane, and I don't think it's that far-fetched to say. A lot depends on what Tulane can do in the non-conference, because Greg, once the American Conference gets rolling, it's just punching bags, and you're just fighting for survival. If there's a chance that Tulane can make some noise in the non-conference, there's only a couple opportunities in the non-conference, and really the primary opportunity is Mississippi State. If they can beat Mississippi State, and you go look at their non-conference, and they can steal a game versus Furman, they were one of the best mid-major teams in the country last season. They're going to be really, really good again. They play a decent Bradley team, but if they go 2-0 against Mississippi State and Furman, and those are played in back-to-back games, they're going to be knocking on the door for a potential NCAA tournament team.
Tulane has so much great top-end talent with Forbes, Cross, and James. If the other guys around them are able to contribute, I'm going to be right there with you, as I do think that this Tulane team, they've got a lot of guys that are able to stuff the stat sheet. They're going to be so hard to match up against with their just breakneck tempo. So I think that there's a lot to take a look at here, in my opinion, probably that number 3 team in the American. So I do agree with you there. And Mike, I know you're doing a tremendous job getting set for the upcoming college basketball season. It's going to be here before we know it. We're about 6 weeks away. Wish it was 6 weeks fewer than that, but I know you're doing a great job getting all prepared, and I know you're in for a big year. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, thank you, Greg. Can't wait. I'll be calling games for CBS Sports Network and ESPN this year. Most of the games, ESPN will most likely be American Conference games. You can follow me on Twitter at MOD43, and hoping to do some fun stuff with CBS Sports HQ, some kind of cross-platform evergreen content to do some player team breakdowns. And, buddy, it's going to be a lot of fun, man. I can't wait.
It is going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a tremendous college basketball season. The American, it's new. It's got that fresh car smell. We've got some new teams in there, and we're going to get some new rivalries. And Mike is going to be there every step of the way. He joins me every year for this preview and always does a top-notch job. A big thanks to Mike for joining me on Cusco Seeps, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it's a new look American, so it's going to be a little bit of a new look project your finish as I give a ranking 1 through 14 for all these teams within the conference. And we're back in lovely Las Vegas for Cusco Seeps with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It was great to be able to get Mike O'Donnell aboard. He does such a great job of taking a look at the game of college basketball. It is so good to get him aboard whenever I'm able to, because he has such a great mind for this game of college basketball, cares so much about the American, as you could tell in the last segment, and every single time he joins this podcast, he lends amazing insights. So a big thanks to Mike for joining me right here on Cusco Soups, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, since I did a conference preview yesterday as well. So just doing a little bit of cleanup here. The news and notes that we saw over the weekend, along with Monday's news and notes, those are going to be polished up on the podcast tomorrow, so have no fear there. But we do have ourselves the conference order of finish to get to, and coming in terms of dead last in my projector order of finish, number 14, meet for the San Antonio Roadrunners. I think that it is going to be a rough year for them, as they do bring back Jordan Ivy Curry. That is going to be able to help them out. Jordan Ivy Curry actually began his career at UTSA, left to be able to play at Pacific. Now it's a case of welcome back Potter, and when Ivy Curry was in the full 2 seasons ago, was able to give the team right around 14 points, 2.5 assists per contest his last year over at UTSA. So I don't think that there's going to be too much of a fall off there, but they do lose the likes of Jacob Germany, John Buggs, TJ Richards. As a matter of fact, I believe that they lose all of their top 5 scorers from last season. Carlton Lingard Jr. is like the only guy on the team that's north of 6'8", as we were alluding to with Mike. This team is going to have a tough time rebounding. They bring in Trey Edmonds from Utah Tech, who might be able to give you a few rebounds, but when you're really relying upon Dre Fuller to help out with this offense along with Justin Thomas, you're in a relatively rough spot. And I do like Justin Thomas. He comes in from UW-Milwaukee. I think that he's going to be able to do some relatively solid things. Last season at UW-Milwaukee, put in there 7.5 points, was a pretty highly touted junior college transfer that shot 43% from 3. Really has a little bit of a tough time creating his own shot, a little bit more of a facilitator to help out Jordan Ivy Curry. But when that's your main facilitator, out there in a conference like this. I think that it's a very rough state of affairs, to say the least. So with regards to UTSA, meet for them. I think that's going to be a rude awakening to the American. I do have them number 14 with regards to my projector or finish. At number 13, I'm going to be going with Tulsa. With Eric Conkle, he's a much better coach than what he showed last year. I was alluding to it in segment number 1. If you were betting against Tulsa all season long last year, you made yourself a whole bunch of money. They went 4-24 with a few pushes against the spread, but I think what is good for Eric Conkle is that he's bringing in some of the Louisiana Tech guys. You could tell that he had a tough time coaching up some of these guys that were on the roster last season, and I think that it was pretty mutual because each of his top 5 scorers from the season ago, they're all out of the fold, and as a matter of fact, I think that anyone that was able to give the team north of 2.5 points per game last season are all out of the fold, but I like the fact that he does bring in Kobe Williams. Williams was a very solid scorer while he was over at Louisiana Tech last season, putting in their 18.5 points per contest. He's going to be able to help dole out the ball, 4 assists, 2 steals, one of the more underrated guards in all of college basketball, playing alongside Keston Willis, who's always been a solid 3-point shooter dating back to his days at Incarnate Word. I'm pretty sure he's a graduate transfer. Should be all good to go. Big question is, what are you going to be able to get down low? Because Chancey Wiggins at 6'9" is pretty much your tallest player on the roster. It's not a place where you want to be. I know that they went a little bit more of the junior college route for some of these forwards as well. They're going to be bringing in someone like an Isaiah Barnes to be able to help out on that front as well. And I think that Barnes is going to be able to do a little bit of something. He comes in from Michigan, just really couldn't get out there on the floor his first 2 years on campus, but I think now he has an opportunity to shine. I do think that for Tulsa, it's just all about finding a little bit more of an identity. With Eric Conkle, it was pretty much a lost year last year. He needs to just pretty much flush it down the toilet. Typically, year number 1 is a time where you're able to improve, you're able to figure some things out. I think he pretty much figured out what not to do with this team, and I think that things are going to be a little bit better. Wins and losses should be a tad bit better, and I think the big thing for them, taking strides forward to 2024-25 and beyond. So I do have Tulsa at number 13 with regards to my projector or finish. At number 12, I am going to be going with Temple. Adam Fisher, I do think has quite a bit of upside. I think he does need to have a year or two to learn how to become a head coach for one. And for two, this is a very new-look Temple team. I mean, you lose Damian Dunn along with K-Leaf Battle. These were the heart and soul of the team from last year. They were able to combine for about 33-plus points per contest. Dunn was able to get her done, giving you about 3 assists per contest. Both these gentlemen shot about 35% from 3. Now, Isaiah Miller, he's coming back, and I like his game. 8.5 points, 4 assists, a steal per contest. He does a good job of being able to dole out the ball. You also are going to be bringing back someone like a Leo White, who's able to give you 5 boards, few assists, not necessarily a demonstrative scorer, but someone who at right around about 6'7", 6'8", provides a little bit of versatility. But you do lose quite a bit of what you had down low with guys like Jamiel Reynolds and company. Moving on, it's not like Temple was necessarily super duper rambunctious in the transfer portal. Steve Settle, someone that while he was at Howard at 6'10", he was able to pop threes, was never necessarily a dominant player though. At 6'10", playing in the MEAC, you'd like to see a guy get a little bit more than 5.5 rebounds per game. Matteo Piccarelli, he comes in from UMBC, solid 3-point shooter, right around 40%. This team has guys that are able to shoot it from 3. I think that they're going to struggle down low. I do think that ball handling in general, which was so paramount when Fisher was over at Penn State, probably going to be a little bit on the lackluster end as well. So I do think that it's going to be a little bit of a growing pain year for Temple. I do have the Owls, so we give our ode to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls at number 12 with regards to my projected order of finish. At number 11, I am going to be going with Charlotte. Charlotte did actually a relatively solid job of maintaining a lot of the guys from last season with the likes of Lucille Patterson, Robert Braswell, Jackson Threadgill being able to return back into the fold. It is a rough state of affairs though, because Ron Sanchez is out of the fold. Aaron Farine, hopefully I said that correctly, he is now going to be taking over the program, and I do think that Charlotte did the right thing by staying in-house, because I know that they were conducting a little bit of a coaching search in like late May or early June when everything broke out, and I really think that that would have been a little bit of doomsday for the team. But you do lose Ali Khalifa. He was so versatile at right around about 6'10", 6'11", 12 points, 6.5 boards, was able to pop threes, was one of your main facilitators, so that's going to be a little bit of an issue. But Igor Milicic, I do think is someone that is a little bit under the radar. Actually began his career at Virginia. Last year, he was able to supply the team with right around 8 points per contest. Had some moments of brilliance, had some games where he didn't necessarily supply a lot. It felt like He did fizzle out a little bit more towards the back half of the season, but I like his overall game. Someone like Jackson Threadgill, he only gave you about 6.5 points per contest, but he's also about a 36% three-point shooter when Robert Braswell was out there on the court last season because he was dealing with injuries, wasn't necessarily as effective as you'd like him to be, but 2 seasons ago, he was able to give the team 8+ points per contest at 6'7", 6'8". He's able to pop some threes, and Deshaun Jackson, the transfer from Washington State, should be able to give you a little bit of something down low, along Dean Rebar, who comes in for Rutgers, just really didn't see a lot of playing time because he was behind Cliff Omarui and company while he was over at Rutgers. I do think that there's upside there, but having to replace their coach in June is just not an easy task. I do think that Charlotte is going to be having their struggles as a result, so I do have Charlotte at number 11 with regards to my projector or finish. At number 10, I am going to be going with South Florida because with South Florida, this is pretty much what Kennesaw State was last season, and you're trying to project pretty much what half of Kennesaw State was, along with a lot of the pieces that come in from the Atlantic Sun, are going to be able to do in a little bit of a higher level of competition, and typically these teams struggle a little bit. Now, I do like the fact that Gasson Jennings, Chris Youngblood, along with Brandon Stroud, are going to be following their coach Amir Abdul-Rahim over to this stop. And for Youngblood, he was really the heart and soul of that Kennesaw State team last season. Go Owls, as he shot over 40% from 3, 14.5 points, pulled down nearly 5 rebounds per contest. Stroud is able to give you right around 6.5 rebounds per game. And if memory serves me correctly, I thought that he actually began his career at Temple, but this does read as a team that is going to be a little bit undersized. I do like that they're going to be bringing back Selton Miguel, who was a nice double-figure scorer last season as well. And with regards to Amir Abdul-Rahim, what I think is important to note with him is that it took him a year to really be able to get things off the ground at Kennesaw State. His first year, it was 1-28. It was just absolutely terrible. From there, 5 wins, 13 wins, and then he busts through 26 wins, makes the NCAA tournament, one of the best rebuilding jobs we've ever seen. They're bringing in Kobe Knox as well. He comes in from the WAC. He's 6'5", able to give you a little bit of versatility. Jose Plasar, someone that's able to give you a little bit of something, whether he's playing off the ball or on the ball. He has spent some time at point guard. He spent some time shooting 35%+ from three-point range. So I like what he brings to the table, but this is going to be a bunch that is going to be sort of a 50-50 approach. Some of the guys from last year, like Sam Hines Jr., Selton Miguel and company, trying to team up with the gentleman coming in from Kennesaw State. So I do think that chemistry might be a little bit lackluster towards the beginning part of the season, and I do think that up transfers like we're going to be seeing with South Florida, they do have a propensity to be maxing out just a little bit as well. So I do have South Florida at number 10 with regards to my projector or finish. At number 9, I am going to be going with SMU. I think that Rob Lanier is doing a solid job, and bringing in Chuck Harris, a double-figure scorer from Butler, I think is going to be able to help out as well. I know that Mike was mentioning his turnover woes, and certainly you want to be able to share that up, but the biggest thing that I take a look at with SMU, can they just get more reliable three-point shooting? And that is something that I do think that Harris is going to be able to bring to the table. On top of that, when it comes to SMU, I think that you need to have the Smiths be able to step up a little bit more as well. Jalen Smith along with Tyreek Smith. Jalen Smith is a holdover from last year. He was able to give the team about 2.5 assists per contest. Was actually not too bad of a facilitator. Only shot right in the neighborhood about 30% from three-point range. I believe that Xavier Foster is still in the fold as well. This is a former top 100 recruit that just has not been able to get out there on the floor. I know that he's dealt with some things off the court in terms of legal things, and then on top of that, I know that he's had some health concerns as well, but Samuel Williamson, I think, is going to be one of the better low post players within this conference last year. 9.5 points, 7.5 boards, has been in college basketball for an eon, but is a rebounding machine with Jaheim Hudson coming in from the Sun Belt, someone who I believe was at Georgia State last season. It will give you some rebounds along with someone who is a former top 200 recruit in Keon Ambrose Hilton. I think that there is some upside for the team down low. If you're able to get Ricardo Wright going as well from three-point range, that'd be beneficial. I feel like there are some ifs with SMU, but I feel like there might be a little bit more depth than what meets the eye as well with Phelps, the 17.5 point per game scorer, returning as well. That's a nice base to be able to build around. So I do have SMU at number 9 with regards to my projector or finish. At number 8, I'm going to be going with East Carolina. East Carolina would have been better than the 6-12 mark that they were in conference last year if it wasn't for the fact that they had so many darn injuries. Javon Small is now out of the fold, but when he went down, it felt like the team was really rolling. Now they are going to have to operate without him, but for one, they've got a sample size of operating without him, and for two, the top 3 scorers outside of Small from last season, Ezra Asar R.J. Felton, Brandon Johnson, they're all back at the fold. And Johnson, he was able to log right around 8 rebounds per contest. You saw when Small went out of the fold, he was able to be a little bit more versatile, shot about 33% from three-point range. Now, oh no, Eastern Carolina, they're going to need to shoot it better from three-point range. They shot about 31.5% as a collective. That was in the bottom 55 in all of college basketball. But you bring in Cam Hayes. Cam Hayes, while he was over at LSU, was able to give you about 8 points per contest. Believe he began his career in the state at NC State, so he's going to be someone that's going to be able to help out Bobby Pettiford. I believe he was the gentleman that had that game-winning shot against Wisconsin in the battle for Atlantis and really didn't do a whole heck of a lot else, but these are a pair of former top 100 guys that I think should be able to make a nice impact. Caleb Count is only 5'8", but he's able to be a little bit of ball handler as well. I really do think that this is an East Carolina team that has quite a bit of upside. Johnson has good versatility. I like the guard play for this team, and I do think that Mike Schwartz is a heck of a coach that is going to be able to get a little bit of better three-point shooting to help this team elevate. So I do have East Carolina. Number 8 with regards to my projector or finish. And number 7, I am going to be going with Wichita State. With Wichita State, bringing back Kenny Poto, I think is very big. He stands in the neighborhood about 6'10", 6'11", and it's just a stat sheet suffer. 8.5 points, 5.5 boards, 2 assists per contest last season. Able to pop threes. Last year he shot 10% from 3. He was much better as a freshman, but I do think that there's a lot of real upside there. With Wichita State, you're going to have a lot of moving pieces because now you've got a new coaching regime that takes over as Paul Mills comes in from Oral Roberts. Now he's actually going to have Kobe Rogers at his disposal as well. Kobe Rogers was one of like 5 guys last year that did not get a waiver to be able to play immediately, but when we last saw him over at Siena during the 2021-22 season, 14 points per contest, shot 43% from three-point range, was very rock solid with that regard. And Arnold Beverly, I think, is someone that does need to be noted because with Beverly, I still remember in the early part of his career at Miami, this guy was a starter. He was able to do so many different things for the team. Just really fell out of favor last year, but and you go back to his first 2 years on campus at Miami, he was doing a very solid job. He was able to give the team 7 points. Has never been a great three-point shooter, but he can be a guy that handles the ball. Steal per game, 2.5 assists per contest in those first 2 years on campus at Miami. He's a nice piece for the team. Bajan Cortez at 6'3" is able to pop it from three-point range. It feels like there's a lot of equals on Wichita State. I don't know if there's necessarily going to be that one guy that's going to be running the show, but the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I think that they're going to be a sneaky team on the glass as well with so many guys that they do a functional job of being able to rebound as well. So with Wichita State, I do have them at number 7 with regards to my projector or finish. At number 6, I'm going to be going North Texas. You now have Ross Hodge in the fold after it was last year Grant McCasland, and there is going to be a little bit of a fall off because Grant McCasland was one of the most awesome coaches in all of college basketball, was really able to do a great job with this program, but bringing back Aaron Scott, Reuben Jones, pair of guys that between the two of them were able to log about 13.5 points per contest, a little bit over 2 steals per game, were big parts of that defense from the season ago. That's big. And then on top of that, we did notice towards back half of the season last year when North Texas was making their run to the NIT Final Four, they were without their main big man and Abdul Usman, and I really liked what I saw out of Matthew Stone. Matthew Stone overall for the season last year, 2.5 points, 2.2 rebounds per contest. Not anything that really stands out, but as he got more minutes towards back half of the season via necessity, he was able to stand out. He was able to do a relatively solid job, along with Mule Sissoko. Sissoko actually began his career at Dayton. He's 6'9", 250 pounds. He was able to get the starts in some of those NIT games, and you take a look at what he was able to do. Final 3 games. Now, I recognize that it's a small sample size, but in those final 3 games, he was averaging 8.3 points and 10 rebounds per contest. This is a very capable rebounder that I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to. John Buggs III, he comes in from UTSA, meet me for the Roadrunners. He's able to give you a double-figure amount of points per game. He's able to do a solid job of shooting it. Certainly not going to be a replacement for Tyler Perry, but at the same time, you're able to start things off with a guy that took about 6.5 threes per game, shot 40% from distance, 11 points per game on a team that really didn't provide him with a whole heck of a lot. I think that that's a good place to start. So with North Texas, I do think that there's some upside here. Did set them number 6 with regards to my projector or finish. At number 5, I'm going to be going with UAB. With UAB, they are going to be trusting in a lot of these junior college transfers to be able to pop as they lose 4 of their top 5 scorers from a season ago. But I take a look at what these top 2 junior college transfers guys were able to do, and I do think that it is going to be relatively solid. Christian Coleman, he was rated number 2 after putting in there right around 16 points, 8 boards. He was able to do some really nice things at the junior college level. And then on top of that, the gentleman from Salt Lake Community College in Yaxel Lenbord, he was absolutely awesome. Right around 18 points, 3 assists, 1.4 steals per contest, shot in the neighborhood above 40.5% from three-point range. He's got really good versatility at 6'9". Alejandro Vasquez, don't call his name. He's able to do a very solid job for the team. He's a good three-point shooter as well. So you've got all sorts of versatility out there on the floor. Daniel Ortiz, who comes in from North Alabama. He shot north of 43% from 3 at a little bit of a lower level. I think that he could be a nice microwave scorer for a UAB team that, with every passing year under Andy Kennedy, they've gotten faster and faster. Tony Toney is someone that at 6'2" in the backcourt should be able to contribute just a little bit. And Eric Gaines, he's going to be the heart and soul of this team, and I think that he's capable of doing so. He was at LSU to begin his career, 11.5 points, 4.3 assists, 1.8 steals per contest. He's one of the main defensive players from that team a season ago as well. And UAB, though we always laud them for their offense and how up-tempo they play, they are a team that they really do hang their hat on being able to play some solid defense, and I think that he's going to be a good leader of that. Certainly a lot of losses for UAB, but I like the way that they have decided that they're going to be bringing in some junior college transfers to be able to help mitigate them. I do have UAB number 5 with regards to my projector or finish. I'm higher than most people on this team. I've got Rice at number 4 with regards to my projector or finish. Max Fiedler, I think, just brings a dynamic that few other players in all of college basketball are going to be able to do. He stands 6'11" and yet was one of the top facilitators in Conference USA last year. 11 points, 7.5 boards, 5 assists per game. He shot 74.8% on his 2-point shots, 73.5% from the floor overall last year. Now, losing Quincy Oliveri is going to be rough. Quincy Oliveri was able to do a tremendous job in this backcourt. Mr. Do-It-All, 18.5 points, 6 boards, 2 assists per contest, but Travis Evie has always been a very capable three-point shooter, made about 35% of his threes with 15.5 points per game. Last season, Makai Mason, along with Cameron Sheffield, are back in the fold, combined 17.5 points per game. These two guys both shot about 37.5% from three-point range. And with Sheffield, he's able to give you 6 boards. He's able to do an okay job of being able to generate some steals, and that's the big question with this Rice team. Can they just be okay on defense? They don't need to be amazing. Can they just be okay on defense? They've got a nice building block with Fiedler being able to man things down low. Rice is not one of those teams that is going to go out there and is going to do an amazing job in the transfer portal or anything like that, but they did bring in someone in Anthony Selden, comes in from Gardner-Webb. He should be able to help along Sam Alajiki. He comes in and should be able to help this team out with his 6'7" versatility as well. All in all, I like this Rice team, and I do think that with Scott Para, he's finally going to be able to get this team to be able to bust through after they've been knocking on the door the last few years. I've got Rice number 4 with regards to my projector or finish. And number 3, I'm going to be going with Tulane. The Green Wave, they've got that top-end talent. Now, the question becomes, what are you going to be able to get out of some of these other guys, like a Greg Glenn III, Jordan Wood, Kobe King? These are the guys that you want to be watching out for, but their big 3 is going to be as formidable as most teams within the conference. I don't know if the top end of Memphis would necessarily like being put in that category, because the top end of Memphis, if they are eligible, because that is a big if, that would be something to really behold. But I mean, Jalen Forbes, 18.5 points, 5 boards, multiple steals per game. I mean, this guy is absolutely awesome. Played very, very well off of Jalen Cook. But, I mean, that said, when you bring back Kevin Cross, someone that's able to give you nearly 15 points, 4 assists, 6.5 boards, is able to pop it from 3, that's big. Now, Cross and Zion James, they shot a combined about 31% from three-point range. You need them to be a little bit better with that regard, but you did see Colin Holloway shoot about 36.5% from 3. Was very limited with regards to his three-point shooting, as he only put in there 6 points per contest, was a part-time starter. They're going to need him to do just a little bit more. You could use someone like a Trey Williams to help out as well. Was limited to 14 games last season, couldn't get out there on the floor too much, but at 6'6", he's got a little bit of versatility as well. But I do think that they are going to be able to get those contributions. Bringing in Glenn III, I think, is very helpful as well, because he's going to be able to give this team a little bit more rough and tumble down low as well. And when it comes to this Tulane team, I do think that that trio of James, Cross, and Forbes is about as good as you are going to find within this conference. And with Asher Woods coming in after he was very versatile and was able to put it in there from three-point range of VMI, this team has lots of potential. I do have Tulane number 3 with regards to my projector or finish. Personally, I think that they fall just short of the NCAA tournament, but I do think that there's a lot of upside there. At number 2, I'm going to be going with Memphis, just because with Memphis, it is a brand spanking new look team, as you're either going to have 5 of your top 6 scorers from last year out of the fold, or all 6. DeAndre Williams, we're still waiting to see if he's going to be eligible or not. He's old enough to be able to be approved to get the team's rental car, but last year, at right around 6'8", 6'9", 17.5 points, 8 boards, 3 assists per game. And the big thing with him is that he would just bring continuity to a Memphis team that they've got all sorts of guys coming in. Javon Quinterly, who, when he was fully healthy a few years ago at Alabama, was a double-figure scorer and shot it really well from three-point range. You could tell that he just still wasn't fully over the injury that he suffered during the 2022 NCAA tournament. As a result, he took a little bit more of a backseat last season on Alabama's team, but a former top 40 recruit of Villanova, I think that he's going to be able to come in. He's going to be able to do some good work. We were talking about the versatility of David Jones. He actually recorded a triple-double in his first stop at DePaul. We need to see if he's going to be eligible or not. I think that he is, but that's something that you do want to be noting as well, and that's something that is in my notes as well. With Jones, overall about a 30% three-point shooter, but is able to give you 13 points. Is able to give you a steal. Is able to do a very good job on the glass at 6'6". And then Jordan Brown, he was that leader for Louisiana. He gives you a block. He's able to shoot from 3 at 6'11". Doesn't shoot a ton of threes, but has that ability. That's big along Jaquan Walton, who was one of the top junior college transfers in all of college basketball a few seasons ago. Last year, absolutely tore it up at Wichita State. 14 points, 5 boards, someone that from three-point range was able to shoot about 40% as well. Just all sorts of versatility. This Memphis team, they've got talent upon talent. I haven't even mentioned Caleb Mills yet. Jonathan Pierre was one of the top players at the Division II level at 6'9". He's able to put it in there from three-point range. We have seen guys from the D2 level come up to the D1 level and make instant contributions. I think that he's going to be one of them, but with Memphis, they do have a few question marks, whereas with my team at number 1, there are none of those, so I do have to put Memphis at number 2 as of right now. At number 1, it's Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic was a team that was just so well-rounded last year, and they were able to play at any specific style. I know that Mike was talking about this team probably playing a little bit more up-tempo this year, and I can certainly see that, but Florida Atlantic, one night, they would be able to beat UAB at their fast up-tempo game. The next night, they would take on a team like North Texas, dominate them in a low-scoring slog. That's what I love about this team. They return 11 out of their 12 players that average at least 1 point per game last season after making the Final Four last year. This team was 15th in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, 28th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. UConn, College of Charleston, Houston, the only other teams to rank in the top 28 in both categories. Nobody on this team averaged more than 2.4 assists per contest, but you did have someone like a Nick Boyd be able to give you 9 points, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists per contest. Sean L. Davis, he's really your main man when it comes to scoring. 14 points per game, shot about 36% from three-point range. Elijah Martin, 13.5 points per game, 37% three-point shooter. The duo that you've got down low, Vladislav Golden along John Carlos Rosado. Both of these guys very dominant on the defensive end. Golden, a little bit more of a shot blocker for this team. They've got so many different looks that they're able to throw at you. They're able to go north of 8 deep. They really didn't bring in a lot via the freshman class or transfers or anything like that, but this is a battle-tested group, and I think it's once again going to be one of the more exciting, and I think that they're in for another massive year. I've got Florida Atlantic number 1 with regards to my projector or finish, and that wraps things up for the American Conference Preview edition of Coast to Coast Hoops right here on the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GN_41. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name me does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast by the 5-star review. Big thanks once again to Mike O'Donnell of ESPN and CBS for joining me in the last segment. I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast during the offseason, giving you guys the news and notes of college basketball and these conference previews, which we are down to only a few conference previews left. We've done a good job of chewing through, and then once we get in season picks and analysis at every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you joining me today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.